Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Andrews with the National Sports Media Association, and today I'm here with Mr. Rabinowitz, sorry.
Rabinowitz. That's okay.
And once again, congratulations on your 2024 National Sports Media Association Award. Could you start us off by maybe an introduction or a background about yourself?
Yeah, I've been at the Columbus Dispatch since 1999, which does seem like an eternity. Started covering the Cleveland Browns, the expansion Browns. And then for 3 years, I covered the Cincinnati Bengals. And then 2011, I joined the Ohio State football beat, and I've done that ever since.
So could you, could you start by talking about what inspires you to get into sports journalism a little bit?
Yeah, I was blessed to have a couple of really good English teachers when I was in school from Dayton, Ohio. And I had a great teacher in junior high, Mrs. Neely, who was very tough on us, but made us get better. And as a result of her and then some other teachers, writing just kind of came pretty easily to me. And then when I got to college, I went to Washington University in St. Louis. They didn't even have a journalism department, so I didn't know what I wanted to be. And I love sports, and I thought, well, maybe I could just kind of merge the two things that I like. And so I ended up going to Northwestern to get my master's and began my career. And so, I don't think there's not some epiphany that I had or anything like that. It was just kind of like, what can I do well, and what do I like?
Yeah, that's great. So what initially, got you involved with the Columbus Dispatch?
Well, I actually met my wife in Pennsylvania. We both worked at the York Daily Record in York, Pennsylvania. And she got there a year before I did. We obviously didn't know each other. And we met, became friends, became more than friends. And her family is from North Canton, Ohio, and mine's from Dayton. And when we found out that the Dispatch had an opening for the Browns beat 99, we thought, well, that's perfect. It's about an hour or two from each of our families. And not that we clamored to get back to Ohio, but it certainly made sense. And so I pursued the job, and fortunately I got it.
Congratulations once again.
Thank you.
So as for Iowa State, you cover not Iowa State, sorry, Ohio State.
Right.
Cover a lot of Ohio State. Could you kind of talk about that a little bit, and how that's gone for you with the university?
Yeah, Ohio State, I always say that Ohio State football is the one thing that unites the state of Ohio. You have two big cities on either end of the state, Cleveland and Cincinnati, and Columbus in the middle. And you have Browns fans and Guardians fans, and you have Bengals fans and Reds fans. And there's not much that unites the state. And Ohio State football does. Even Ohio State basketball doesn't, because there are a lot of really good college basketball programs in the state. There's really nothing comparable to Ohio State in terms of bringing the whole city or the whole state together. And it's the other thing is it's been incredibly successful. It's the only program in the country that's never had an extended dip, never had more than two consecutive losing seasons in a century, which is just unbelievable. So it's always been good, and it's the one thing that brings the state together, it's great, but it also makes the program just a pressure cooker for the people in it, and to a lesser extent, the people covering it. I mean, we think it might be the biggest beat in the country in terms of number of reporters that cover Ohio State football. When you factor in the newspapers, TV stations, websites, it's huge. And it's. I'm not sure it's how would you know if it's really the biggest? But we've kind of thought about it and think I don't know who's bigger, put it that way. And so it's a demanding beat. There's always news. Anytime you've got 85 scholarship players and walk-ons and you've got college age kids, there's always something's going to happen. And now with the transfer portal and all that stuff, it's people say, "What do you do in the off season?" I kind of laugh at them. There's no off season for Ohio State football. Right now we're in the middle of spring practice, and that's a little more intense. But even when there's nothing going on, there's usually something going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you've been covering football and other sports for a long time. How have you seen the landscape of sports journalism change?
Oh, it's night and day. I mean, what I think about, I started in 1988, which is feels like it's in, the ancient times, which in some ways it was. You would write a story and you'd be done. That would be it. And there was no internet. And if you made a mistake, you had to live with it. There was no correcting it. Now it is 24 hours a day. If something happens at 11 o'clock at night, you got to react and get out of bed or get out of the couch or whatever and write it. If you do make a mistake, you can correct it. So that's one good thing. You don't have to worry about necessarily story length as much as you used to. Or used to when I started, and really for a long time. If the story had to be 600 words, it had to be 600 words, no matter what it was worthy of being. Now you can kind of write it for what it's worth. So that's an improvement. We do podcasts now. We do videos now. We never obviously did any of that stuff when we were a pure newspaper. So it's changed dramatically. I still think there's a place for storytelling and getting into the human side of things, and that's what drives me. A lot of this business is driven by analytics now, like it is in most things, and that has its pros and cons, but I don't think we can ever lose sight of the human element in things and in stories that we write. And that's really what matters. It's the people that we write about.
Yeah, totally. And as for Ohio State, you covered it for a while. Are there any stories, like very memorable stories that you would like to tell, or just situations?
Yeah, I've forgotten more than I remember for sure. For certain. I did a profile on C.J. Stroud a couple years ago. That was the first time that he ever really talked in any kind of length about his father and the fact his father had been imprisoned and how that shaped him and that whole ordeal. I'm proud of that story. I did a story on Shane Olivier, who is one of these things where he got his degree years and years after he played. He was on the 2002 national championship team and got his degree close to 20 years later. And I knew he played in the pros and I really didn't know much about it. So I thought, it'll be an interesting story. And it turns out he had gone through the depths of hell, basically, with drug addiction and told his story. Unfortunately, he died, last year, I think it was. And that hit me hard. I don't know the cause of death exactly, but to have written that story and kind of gotten invested with his story as a person, and then to have him die suddenly was hard to take. There are a lot of stories. I wish I could remember them. I remember those stories much more than the games, honestly. The national championship in 2014 was really cool, but it's the stories of the people that really drive me.
That's amazing. And what advice would you give a young, sports journalist trying to enter the industry?
It's funny. I had this conversation with a friend yesterday, and I always say whenever I talk to journalism classes, if you want to be a sports writer, you better like the writing more than you like the sports, because the love of the sport is going to fade. I don't watch a lot of sports other than the teams I root for. I don't just like casually turn on ESPN and watch an NBA game. I wouldn't want to do that. But so you have to love the craft of writing. You have to know the language. You have to have an appreciation for spelling. I know the spell check and Grammarly and all that stuff, but you still have to know that. You have to be careful with the language and know the language. And just for people starting out, do everything you can. Write as much as you can. Read as much as you can. Volunteer to do whatever you got to do to get your foot in the door. It's obviously a very competitive business. It's a very hard business. I'm not sure what the business model is going to be in the future. I'm not sure that the current one is succeeding very well. We're all kind of a shoulder tap away from being out of it. And so, I don't have advice that way other than do the best you can to make yourself invaluable, or at least have a skill that is as close to unique as you can. That's my best piece of advice. Work really hard, be conscientious, treat people fairly. I've written very critical stories about people, but because they thought that I handled it in a professional way and didn't take pot shots at them, just kind of stuck to the facts as best I could determine. I've maintained good relationships with people. And so you can be very critical, but be fair and be just a decent human being. And I think that does carry you a long way.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me to interview today, and congratulations on your 2024 National Sports Media Association Award as well.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you.